from the bad guy, I'ma stare him in the eye like, what's up?
All right, guys, let's try that again. Okay. I am Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss. Mwah. Thank you for joining. We had a little bit of technical difficulties behind the scenes, so I appreciate you joining. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, I have to be perfectly honest in saying that this month, but particularly, I guess, because I'm talking about it today, um, it's personal. It's personal without going, into too much detail. Because what I'm starting to realize, and I know I'm not the only person, right? When you really start sitting back and getting into where my behaviors are coming from, what are some of the things that I'm noticing that, came from childhood or whatever, like where did I learn some things from? And so for those of you who may not know my story, in short, I'm living with my mom now as I left out of New York, moved back to my home state of Michigan. And I'm back with my three kids. I left at 17, I'm back at 48. So a whole lot of differences. And I left a very toxic relationship before it got any worse, just cut the ties and made the pivot to shift and continue to move forward, right? And so in the midst of all of that, um, I'm staying here with my mom, and her significant other as well. And they have so graciously allowed for the four of us to be here. But in being so close, because my mom and I have always been really close. And so, but being in physicality with her every day has brought me to see. How can I put this? To see her in a different light, right? And that, I don't mean it as a bad thing. What I am saying though is as an adult, I'm able now to see similarities between some of the ways she handles things that I don't know. At times I would question, but then I sit back and I'm like, now I see why I would do, you know, certain things in my own relationship. And I'm working to make changes towards it, right? And so my mom and I have had some pretty candid conversations, and so um, there have been some nuggets that have come out of that I want to share with you, and so that's the basis of where I'm starting for the month, to be honest. But without being repetitious and what have you, but there are some things that I've been able to pull and thread along the way through various conversations that I think are worth sharing without going too deep into her personal history, because that's her story to tell. But just wanting, again, to put it out there because I know there are mothers and daughters who are out there who are going through their things, and the daughters are leaving toxic relationships, and the moms are like, hey, I get it, come do your do over, do your pivot, do your thing, and then step back when you're able to, or what have you. I mean, um, and so all of that being said, that's the foundation of what I'm going to be speaking to, right? So, just wanted to give you that little bit of heads up as I go into tonight's live. So, if you haven't checked it out already, the title is She Was a Woman Before She Was My Mother, right? And like I said, there have been conversations where I'm able to kind of thread some things that I'm going to present throughout the month, actually. And the basis of it actually started from when we were playing our game last week, Say It Like Mama Says It. Um, and there was part of at the end, I gave a couple of affirmations, and the one that I realized really stuck with me was, I'm evolving past my mother's pain, but never without honoring her power. And that one truly, truly resonated. So that's where I'm going to share. So as I prepare for that, if you're with me live on my Facebook page, please go ahead, give me those likes, those loves, those cares, and feel free to share as well. Please share. And the same if you are catching me on YouTube with the Empowered Voices Network with PJ Jones, please go ahead, like and subscribe and comment. And again, please share, 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 because there is at least one soul out there with whom this is going to resonate deeply. And so it's worth it, right? So, all of that being said, I'm going to go into it. I'm going to come back to the cornerstone of the Kiss Corner at the end of the broadcast because, like I said, we were a little behind. So, I want to go ahead and get into it. And so, so, like I said, tonight's episode is called She Was a Woman Before She Was My Mother. And I tagged it with Before She Raised Me, Life Raised Her. Right. And I'm just really starting to see both. Now, like I said, my mom and I have always had a pretty open and candid relationship. Um, and so she shared a lot with me about her childhood and growing up and things like that, and some of the decisions she made that she wished she could kind of redo, and some of those that, again, may not have felt so great at the time, but ended up showing a better path than what she may have anticipated, and things like that. So, I've learned a lot from my mom, and from her, I have grown to adapt that belief of knowing that you want to give people their flowers while they are still alive and not waiting until they have passed away, right? Um, so, like I said, what I'm coming to realize is that when you start seeing your mom as a full woman, right? It takes on a different meaning. And again, this is not to say that I've never known that my mom was a woman, that I didn't know she was a child, and this, but it's just when we talk about it now as a woman, it's in the fullness of her womanhood and being in relationships throughout her life, be they with significant others, that of course was inclusive of my dad at some point, with me and my brothers, and now some of the relationships she has with her grandchildren. They're all little, but still just seeing her evolve and mature as life continues. And so, like I said, I'm starting to see some parallels. So, again, she's more than just a caregiver or a disciplinarian, or that voice in your head when you about to do something that your mama didn't raise you to do, so to speak. You know, but you start to see her as a whole layered woman, one who has her own traumas, right? Her own traumas, her own confusion, her own heartbreak, and her own learned behavior. And so that part, again, was something that I either didn't always recognize or I didn't always acknowledge. Again, because why? She's been mama my whole life, right? And so I see that you start to compartmentalize, excuse me, and kind of box your parents in a way that you may not with other people, right? And so that for me is the eye opener, like I said, in conversations that she and I have recently started having, and that I am now able to see in a different way. And so, I'll give you a quick story to kind of set for example, of what I'm talking about, right? So, it's July, yeah. So just this past month, I had a conversation with my mom that started out simple. You know, at least I felt like maybe it would be simple. She asked to speak to me. Long story short, we sit down and she starts out talking about a debt collector who had called her, but the debt was in regards to me. right? Now, mind you, she's not on any of my accounts, but they called her anyway. And so, of course, she's worried, right? And so, again, I'm explaining to her, like, hey, it's my situation. I'm handling it. This is what I've been working on. They shouldn't have come to you, but of course, they're just working to try to get the debt collected, and that I totally understand her concern, but, you know, I'm working on it. Don't know why they've called you. I'll put in some calls on my end to get that straightened out in as much as I can. But, here's my situation. Right. And so she was really concerned. She's like, oh, well, I didn't know that. And again, I'm like, I'm here with 3 kids. Like, you got enough on your plate and in your own life. So I didn't feel the need to get into all of that. But rest assured, like, I've been taking care of this for a few months. I did make it clear when I came that I was carrying some debt and what have you. And so she was just really, really antsy about it. And for a moment, I was taking it as like, well, maybe she thinks like I'm trying to get over on her or something. And I really had to like breathe my way through that, because I'm like, of all the people in the world, right? First of all, let me back that up. First and foremost, that's not me. That's not my character. But in addition to that, right, the last person I'm out here trying to trick, jip, anything of the sort is my own mother, right? Um, and so as I'm talking and I'm going through these reactions and emotions in my own mind and like woo sign, because I'm like, okay, you got to back away. Like, that's not where she's coming from. That's just how I was starting to take it, right? And so, as we're talking, and I'm trying to clarify and answer her questions, and as best I can to make sure that she's understanding the situation, not that I couldn't answer the questions, right? And I started realizing, right, that she wasn't just talking to me as my mom. And that's the part I think that started to stick me a bit, because again, I'm thinking, well, this is just another mama daughter talk, but it was more to it than that. And I could clearly see it in the way that she was physically responding, even, right? She was reacting. And again, it's a lot that I do know about my mom's background, which is then to say there's a lot that I'm sure I don't know, right? And so she was reacting as a woman who's had to survive. And I mean, my mom has survived quite a bit. She's been in debt. She's carried a household. She knows what it means to be responsible, of course, for more than just herself, right? I'm one of 3. And my mom was one of 5, and she took care of not only a lot on her siblings' side and whatever, and their children, but me and my brothers and my dad and herself. And then later on, as my grandmother took ill, her, which was her mother-in-law, and my mom lost her parents early. So it was just, again, there's a lot more than just the surface level, right? And so I'm thinking through some of these things in the moment, and some of it later in conversation with her, and realizing, right, that I'm starting to see her less as the authority figure she's been in my life in many ways, right? And more as a human being who's really just trying to keep things together, right? Again, I don't just see my mom. I realize that I am seeing a woman, right? A tired woman, a cautious woman, a woman who doesn't like confrontation, who avoids it, who might need backup when she's uncomfortable, who hasn't fully healed from her own debts, be those emotional or financial. And so once we finished having this conversation and coming to a point where, she felt that she understood where I was coming from, and that she was a little more comfortable with the situation, because my mom is a huge technophobe. So this whole technology and how they were able to contact her and all of that was just really freaking her out. And she came to a place of acknowledging, as we went past that and further in conversation, that she just didn't always want to be in a place of like having to make these big bold decisions anymore and feeling like the world has moved forward in a way that she hasn't, and so it makes her decision making really hard, right? And so she just asks that I be really patient with her, and she says this, of course, with tears in her eyes and everything, and she's like, I don't like to be in confrontation. I don't want people to be unhappy and for things to get to be unsettled, right? And so she was just like, just be patient with me, and she gives me a hug and what have you. And part of me kept saying, like, wow, like this is it, this is my mom. But this isn't the woman who raised me, right? And then I had to step back on that, and I'm like, no, like that's okay. She's not, right? My mom and I are 21 years apart. I'm 48. So, my mom was evolving, but in my mind, I'm seeing her as the woman I saw in my 20s, in her 20s, and in her 30s, and even in her early 40s. My mom, God bless her, in 2 months will be 70 years old. So she should be a different person, right? And that's where that understanding of grace starts to come into play, and the realization that you're talking to a complex human being, and as complex as anybody, right? And so you got to move what that mama title is, um, and allow her to be her, right? And so in her saying these things, I actually heard her as a woman and not just as a mother. So again, like when you're the child, your mama is just mama, right? You don't tend to think of her having fear or regret or moments where she didn't know what to do, because in my head, my mama always knew what to do, right? And even if she didn't, and there were times where she had to acknowledge she didn't necessarily know what to do, but somehow, some way, and again, this was how I took it as a kid, she was able to figure it out, and I was always in awe of that, right? Not realizing that I know now as an adult that that's really different, but I think there's a part of me that really still stuck to that childhood thinking of mama always made a way, and mama always made do, and mama always figured it out because that's just what mama does, right? And so again, you don't always think of her having these moments, right? And feelings of not really knowing what to do. And so as you grow, right? Um, and especially for me becoming a mother myself, I start to realize that she had to learn on the fly, right? Just like we all do in some regard. And she didn't get a guidebook. And so the truth is, she didn't always get to be just a woman. She had to be strong, she had to be silent, and she had to keep moving. So as I evolve and as I grow past the ways I learn to avoid confrontation, as I try to handle money, conflict, and my emotions differently, I have to remind myself that I'm not her, but I wouldn't be me without her, right? Think about that. I'm not her. You're not her, but I wouldn't be me without her, and neither would you. So, what does that say ultimately, right? Her pain doesn't define me, but her power, that still lives within me, whether I like it or not. And one thing I will say, like I said, her story is hers to tell, but my mom, despite our sometimes differences and things like that as I was growing up and even in adulthood, my mom has been a hell of a powerful woman. And so I will accept being able to carry that same lineage of power. So tonight, I presented this to be able to say that we're holding space for all of it. I'm holding space for her mistakes, my mistakes, her miracles, my miracles, her silence, my silence, and her strength and my strength. Why? Because we can't heal if we won't first see our mamas as women. And seeing her clearly might just help me see me more clearly too. And I'm even going to take back the might. I know that it's helping me to see myself more clearly in a way that I didn't and that I don't think I could have um, if I were still in New York. And it's also in a way that I need it right now. And so I know we're here live every week, but whether you are in the comments right now or if you're watching the replay while you're cooking or walking or hiding from your kids in the bathroom, whatever the case may be, how you're hearing this live or in replay, I want you to take a moment and reflect with me, right? Um, I want you to think about the first time you saw your mother as a woman. And again, not mom, the title, but the human being, the one with disappointments, fears, hopes, heartbreaks, and maybe even a little petty streak, right? But you know what I mean, right? The first time you saw her lose her cool or admit that she was tired or do something that made you go, wait a minute, my mama is a whole person out here, right? For some of us, it came early. Maybe when you watched her cry behind a closed bedroom door and realized, oh, she isn't invincible. And I'm gonna tell you, there have been times I know that my mother cried behind that door. And while I had to acknowledge that she wasn't invincible, I'm going to tell you, I didn't fully believe it until recently, right? My mama was invincible to me, but that's unfair to put on anybody because no one is, right? And these are some of the things that I'm now coming to realize. Maybe it didn't come to you until you became a mother or a caregiver or found yourself in the same kind of financial mess you once had to survive. And right now I'm in all of that. Right? Maybe you saw her as a human being, as a full woman. That moment she let her guard down, right? And told you something about her childhood that made you understand everything a little differently. And with my mom, I've experienced all of those things with her. But again, it's just been in these recent months that I'm really taking to heart what all of that means in terms of who I see before me and why and how she moves the way she does. And the same for me, right? Some of the things that I'm starting to learn about myself and why and how I perhaps may move in the ways that I do. And so, I remember watching my mom after a long day of work. My mama still has long days of work. And she was sitting at the table in silence, no music, no TV, no nothing. And she was sitting there and she had like this really distant look in her eye. And I didn't know it then, but it was just a moment of her being overwhelmed, right? And that was her being more than just a mom. Again, that was like when she finally opened. And I remember when I was younger, really, really young, my dad was in school. I want to say it was like a art school or something like that. And I would remember him coming home with these sketches and stuff, and he had it in this briefcase. And I remember my mom kind of putting herself on hold to kind of wait for my dad to finish out his schooling. And then some years later, I'm having a conversation with her and realizing that, wow, she didn't say it. This was my own realization. Maybe she said it in so many words. I put it that way. She didn't say it directly. That she had put her dreams, what she really passionately wanted to do was be a kindergarten teacher. And she had put that on hold, thinking maybe at some point she'd be able to come back to it and did not. And I'm like, wow, but she sat and she worked and she made sure that my dad had his moment to take his stab at something that he thought maybe he wanted to do. He didn't pursue it further, but it was something that he was interested in at the time. And realizing, like, wow, like, damn, that was never reciprocated for her. What would that feel like? Right? Because I didn't go through that. If anything held me back in as much as in terms of looking at it from that perspective, it was really me and still is in some ways. Like I'll overthink and hold myself back from moving forward. Now, did I always have a partner that was, in alignment with the things that I wanted to do? No. But then I also had to realize that's what happened with my mother, right? Both ways. One, she kinda talked herself out of it and thinking, "Oh, well, I don't have the background to go to school to then go in to teach other people's children," and at the same time, didn't have the same support from my dad that she had given to him about her goals to pursue the opportunity to just try, right? To work in the education field with little kids. And so you start to think about like that's a huge dream deferred. And that's just one of, I'm sure, multiple multitudes of sacrifices my mom has given. And so, again, if you are watching live, I want you to go ahead and drop a comment, right? Um, that acknowledges for you about your mom the fact that she wasn't born a mother, right? And so she didn't get everything right, but she became one. And so, what you can put in the comments, or if you don't want to put it and you just want to speak it out loud to yourself, that's cool. But if you would be so kind as to engage in those comments, we would like it. And put in there, I see her now, right? And again, even if you're catching it in replay, go ahead and put it in there. I see her now. Not just as the woman who raised me, but as the woman who survived so I could grow. I see her now. The moment we start seeing our mothers go through a grown woman's lens, it opens a door to grace, to grief, to forgiveness, and to a new kind of understanding. And that understanding, I'm now coming to realize, is where the healing begins. So let's take it a little bit deeper. Because once you see her clearly, it gets harder to carry resentment. It's harder to carry judgment. But it also gets easier to name what you want to do differently and why. So here's a truth that I've had to sit with. She didn't get to grow at her own pace. Life forced her to be strong and to be silent and to just stay at times. And when I look at some of my own habits, avoiding conflict, internalizing stress, trying to do it all myself, I see where I inherited some of that too. But I get to choose something different. I get to name the patterns and then break them. And so do you. We get to name the patterns and break them. So I don't have to ignore her flaws, but I also don't have to carry them as my own. She didn't get to learn everything. She had to carry everything. And when I tell you the weight of that statement is more than what I'm saying and what I'm giving credence to, she carried and carries a lot. And for that, I don't just forgive her, I honor her. And so here's where it all really started to shift for me. Again, once I saw her as not just my mother, but as a woman, I couldn't unsee it. I can't unsee it. I no longer pretend like everything made sense just because it came from her. I can start seeing where she was hurting, where she was stuck, and where she passed down what she never had the space to heal. She passed down what she never had the space to heal. And so a lot of us inherited behaviors, not because someone taught them to us directly, but because we watched our mothers survive with them. For example, I inherited avoidance. Not because she told me to run from hard conversations, but because I never saw her have a real one in real time. I inherited guilt. And when I say that, let me back up, in real time outside of myself, right? So I never felt like she had an issue per se talking to me. But with anybody else with whom she had to really kind of dig in and have that difficult conversation, again, I'm not saying they never happened, but it wasn't something that I ever saw, or at least not in real time. I inherited guilt, not because she said I should feel bad for needing something, because she never did, but because she gave so much and asked for so little, I felt like I was asking too much. And being back home has been a big ask. To which she responded quickly, come back. And finally, I inherited people pleasing, right? Peacekeeping and perfectionism. And I thought all those things meant that I was being good when really I was just being quiet. So it goes in line with some of the patterns that I started repeating, right? I stopped advocating for myself because I didn't want to start something, right? I tried to keep peace in the house. All right, let me just swallow it and choke it back a little bit or dial it down. I might say something, but it's not really what I'm thinking and really at the level of what I'm feeling because it'll go left. Let me keep the peace, right? But in the meantime, what's happening with me is festering. I didn't express when I was overwhelmed because I didn't want to look weak. I didn't express when I was overwhelmed because I didn't want to look weak. And why am I repeating that? Because I think as Black women, that's one that I know I'm not alone. And we got to get through that. I stayed longer than I should have in my relationship, trying to make it work for the kids. My mama did too. So it all sounded familiar, right? It's not just her pain, it was my own pattern now, and one that I can change. And so I'm working to change it. So again, I'm watching my mom at nearly 70 years old, still avoiding conflict, right? Still struggling to advocate for herself at times, still internalizing her thoughts and her pain because it's easier than confrontation, still zoning out sometimes, and she'll just start scrolling when something feels too heavy. And that makes me sad. It makes me sad because I know she's not avoiding it to hurt anyone. She's doing it because it's what's helped her to survive. But survival doesn't always make room for healing. I'm going to say that again. Survival doesn't always make room for healing. So here's where the breakthrough comes in. I can honor her and still choose differently. I can see the roots and decide which ones I want to water. I can say this came from her, but it doesn't have to continue through me. And that's not betrayal, nor is it disrespect. That's growth. I don't break the bond, I break the pattern. I don't throw away her lessons, I filter them. And I don't erase her sacrifices, I elevate them by living a life that includes healing, boundaries, rest, and room to be soft. She didn't get to grow at her own pace. She had to carry everybody else. She didn't get therapy. She got prayer, pressure, and the praise of being a strong Black woman. She didn't get safe spaces. She had to build a fortress inside of herself just to keep going. And so for me, I get to do it differently. And that's not just a win for me, that's a legacy shift. Because it begins to shift not only for me, but then for the generations, right? My daughters, my grandchildren. It gets to shift. So before we close out, I want to speak some affirmations over this space, over my mama, myself, and over you. Because we're not just survivors of our upbringing, we're architects of our next generation's freedom. So let me leave you with a few affirmations tonight for all of us who are growing up again, this time with clearer eyes. I see my mother as a whole woman, not just a role. I can hold space for her pain without holding on to it as my own. And finally, I honor the power she passed down and release the pain she didn't mean to. So I pray that this episode resonated with at least one soul to get a better understanding of where some of your thoughts, your moves, your actions are coming from in these toxic relationships. Again, not in order to lay blame, but to get to an understanding. And a lot of times it's coming from your own home. Your parents are your first teachers. And if particularly you do have a close relationship with your mom, you may start looking there first, right? That's your first female figure or your mother figure if it's not your direct biological mother. And so I just wanted to share where I'm beginning to learn and realize and open my eyes about my mom and where I am in my life, the parallels that I see, and how I'm choosing to acknowledge them, but at the same time, start to break some of these legacies and rebuild and recreate in a way that lets go of some of the toxic cycles. So, having said all of that, I thank you for joining me this evening. Before I close again, I'm going to give a special thank you to tonight's sponsor and Empowered Voices, Finding Strength in Survivors. As you all know, this platform is about healing, growing, and reclaiming. And Empowered Voices is doing just that, helping survivors rise from silence into strength. If you want to support this mission, visit the link scrolling below. If you're watching in YouTube, and if you're on Facebook, you can check the pinned comment and you should be able to see a link there where you can go and it'll take you in for a donation there. Your support makes rooms for stories that never got told and the healing that still deserves to happen. And so, in essence, this partnership is great because it aligns with the cornerstone of the KISS Corner. For women like me who have left toxic relationships and are ready to put in the work necessary to elevate into a higher versions of themselves. And so I thank you all for spending your evening with me. I know we started a little late and I ran over, but I really, really had to share this one with you guys. And so, whether you are still unlearning or still forgiving or still figuring it out, know this: you are not behind, you are becoming. And your mother, she may not have gotten it all right, but her strength is in you. So, this is Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss. Mwah. I will see you all again next week. What they say, same back time, same back station. Remember, we have changed to Sundays, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you're going to continue to elevate as you heal along, as you elevate. Let me change that. Try that one more time, right? I want you to continue to elevate as you move along your healing journey. Yes. Keep it real and keep it gentle. And always remember, you keep it simple for yourself. See you again next week. Mwah. Have a good night.